Digital marketing for HVAC and home service businesses.
Strategies and stories from industry experts to help you succeed.
Hello, Liz Menkes. Thank you for joining us on the Outwork'em Podcast, where we interview industry experts in the home service industry. Liz Menkes is the owner-operator of EMF Healthy, and she helps people to diagnose and remediate EMF situations in their home. And
Yes.
yeah, Liz, welcome to the podcast. To kick things off, what started your passion for EMF health, and how did you transition into this specialized field?
Yeah, so it all started when a cell tower was proposed less than 300 feet from my home. And I was living in a suburban area outside of San Francisco. And that led me to learning more about it. And ultimately, I learned so much about it that this firm offered me a job. They advise cities on the regulation of wireless facilities. And I did that for a while. And I wanted to do more to help people in their homes where they have more control. So I ended up getting certified uh, through the Building Biology Institute. And as that work took off, then I let the other one go. But I tell people that that cell tower was one of the biggest blessings in my life because it led me to doing this work where I get to really make a big difference for people.
I love that. You've clearly dedicated yourself to mastering this niche. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced in building your expertise, and how did you overcome them?
So the work involves at times working with electricians, and I had no background in electricity, and so it was kind of a very like a foreign language to me. And so I got certified through the local community college in electricity, and that really helped me to talk more intelligently to electricians. So I just kept taking courses and things that I felt would help improve my knowledge and expertise.
That's awesome. Do you feel like well received from the electricians that you work with typically? Do they understand kind of where you're coming from?
Typically now, I
Hmm.
know some electricians that specialize in electromagnetic fields, and so that it's easy. You know, we really are completely on the same page.
Yeah,
Um, some other like more traditional electricians, some are open to it and some are not, you know?
yeah, yeah. Side note on that, we had gone and stayed in a hotel recently, and when we were there, I walked in and I heard a little bit of a buzzing, and I was like, "The electricity's off in this place. I can I can hear it." And
Hmm.
my husband was like, "I don't hear anything." I was like, "I hear it." And so I'm like going around with my ear to each appliance, and it ended up being like this lamp. But then as we stayed there over the next few days, then the lights started to flicker, and then there was a
Hmm.
burning smell, and then the oven went off, and I was like, I told you, like, there's something up with the electricity in this place.
Yeah.
So some people are more sensitive than others, but yeah, for people who don't have any understanding of EMFs, how would you give them a quick and easy to understand description of what EMFs are, and what they should be concerned about?
Yeah. So in general, the public uses that as a catch-all term
Mm,
for four different kinds of frequencies that we measure in people's homes. So one is the technical term is radio frequency, but it's any kind of wireless from cell towers, cell phones, routers, Bluetooth, anything in the wireless frequency range. The second one is magnetic fields, like from power lines. The third one is electric fields, like from the wiring in your walls and cords that are plugged in. And the fourth one is what's called dirty electricity. It's the common name for it. Um, it's high frequency spikes that ride along on the wiring in your walls, and it's caused by AC, alternating current. So every house has it to some degree, but certain things produce more of it than others, like many solar inverters produce high dirty electricity.
Mm.
So those are the four kinds of frequencies that we measure. And in terms of why people should be concerned, virtually every home has extreme levels of some kind of EMF in some parts of the home.
Wow.
And it's like a silent epidemic because you can't see it or hear it, most people. And it affects, and the most common that I find, that I expect to find in virtually every home, is going to be extreme levels of wireless exposure. And then every house is different, so it can be than the others. It just depends on what I find. But in terms of why people should be concerned, is that this can affect virtually every system in your body. So there's the early warning symptoms of overexposure, like the difficulty sleeping, difficulty concentrating, the brain fog, fatigue, headaches, ringing in your ears. And then there's the longer term effects. It's been wireless, for example, and magnetic fields. Both have been classified as possible carcinogens because of increased risk for cancers. And for wireless, it's the brain tumors. And brain tumors are now the leading type of cancer among adolescents. And for magnetic, the link was childhood leukemia.
Wow.
But there's many other kinds of effects. It can affect skin, cognitive, heart. There's the neurodegenerative diseases, the memory. So virtually every system it can affect.
Mm. Yeah, that's so wild. What do you advise people to do? Because today we're like so saturated with tech. So many of us work on our computers.
Yeah.
Where do you see the most common EMF related issues arising in people's homes? Like, is it like the office? Is it the bedroom? Is it the kitchen? Do you have like a room that typically is the most biggest offender?
Yeah, great question. So people sometimes think that the biggest source of wireless exposure are the cell towers, but 99% of the time, what I find, it's the devices in people's homes. So for example, it's your laptop, it's your Wi-Fi enabled computer, it's your cell phone. The router, depending on where it's located in your house. I found it in children's bedrooms, for example.
Wow.
But that is very, very powerful. And so just as an example of what the numbers mean, over 1,000 microwatts per meter squared is considered extreme concern. So just remember, over 1,000. And if someone is sitting here listening to this on their laptop, for example, and it's Wi-Fi enabled, they're getting about 70,000 from that laptop alone.
Whoa.
So it's really serious.
Dang.
And the cell phone, and I'll tell you in a minute what you can do about it.
Yeah.
But the cell phone, for example, if you're holding it in your hand, maybe about a foot or so from your body, you're getting about, and remember, 1,000 is extreme concern, you're getting about 20,000 in your body. And if you move it closer to your body, you're probably 100 or 200,000. And at your hand, you're like 1 million or 2 million.
Oh no.
And that's why some people will say they can feel tingling in their hand, or they'll get pain in their hand. And so in terms of what you can do about it, in a nutshell, for your devices in your home, they can all be hardwired. And so I'm talking to you right now on a hardwired laptop. So I have no exposure to wireless right here. And laptops, iPads can be hardwired. Cell phones can be hardwired. And in terms of your cell phone itself, number one thing I would recommend to people is not to sleep with your cell phone by the head of your bed at night if the Wi-Fi is or if it's enabled. Um, if you use it as an alarm clock, go to Target and get a little $10 battery operated little alarm clock. Very simple solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got the analog clock for a while for our alarm system, but when we moved out of our house, now it's in storage, so we're back to the cell phone, but we try to put our phones away from the bed and we put it on airplane mode. Does that help at all?
Yes. Okay. So airplane mode is good.
Yep.
The caveat is you have to make sure that Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are turned off on the cell phone,
Okay.
because if they're not, then it's still emitting. So unless you have a little meter to test it, it's not 100% sure that that's good.
Okay. That's good to know. This is also a little side question. What about these? Do you know these whoops? Are these like terrible?
Well, they're not great,
Okay.
and so the closer the device is to you, the more powerful it is.
Okay.
And they say distance is your friend. So because that's right on your hand, or your arm, you're getting a pretty powerful signal. And that's why some people get rashes right under where they're wearing it.
Yeah.
So I believe it can be put in airplane mode as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
mine is the Whoop. It doesn't have a face on it, so I think it's lower EMF than the Apple Watches and stuff like that. But I do notice, like, I'll get just a little bit of sensitive skin under where I wear it, and I'll feel like, oh, I want to switch it to the other arm. So that's good to know. Maybe I won't be wearing my Whoop long term anymore.
Yeah. I will tell you a quick little funny story.
Yeah, please.
I was talking to this with my brother-in-law, and he said, because he kept his cell phone in his, he had these pants, and there was a pocket like at the leg level, and he says, I get this pain in my leg, where my cell phone is. So, you know what I did to solve the problem? I switched it to the other leg. I said, well, that's a great idea.
You're like, maybe don't wear it in the pocket anymore. What about like Faraday containers or like wool clothing? Does that help protect you at all from EMF on the body?
So are you talking about like the cases for the cell phones?
Yeah.
So they don't really work that well. It's a kind of a technical thing, but because the shielding material is so close to the phone itself, it doesn't work that well. The best thing you can do is if you keep your phone on airplane mode and then just check it once in a while during the day.
Okay.
Kind of use it like an answering machine,
Yeah, totally. What are some of like the most common misconceptions people have about EMFs and how do you address that?
Yeah, so some of the most common things I hear is it's everywhere, there's nothing I can do. And I show people that when I go to someone's home, I'll take the measurements as I find the home, and then we turn off temporarily turn off the wireless devices in their home, like their router, and I show them that the levels just drop like a rock when we reduce the exposures in their own home. And they think because they can see a network, they see like, oh, I see 10 networks on my phone, there's nothing I can do. But it only takes a real tiny little signal for you to get that, to be able to see that network. And so again, when I show them that the levels drop like a rock, then they believe it. the situation, unfortunately, if you live in an apartment building and there's people above you and below you and to the sides of you, that can be a more challenging situation. But if you're in a single family home, generally you can get really low levels.
If someone were to be in an apartment or a condo and they wanted to mitigate their exposure, or like, you know, I'm sure you've heard of the grounding mats or the grounding sheets or things like that. Like, is there anything that they can do in their own little nest to help mitigate their exposure?
Yeah, so it depends where the source is coming from. But for example, and we can tell with my meters where it's coming from. So there's different things we can do. There's fabric that can be tacked up on the wall that will block it.
Mhm.
And so, but if it's coming like really strong from above you or from below you, that's a little harder. But
Mm.
again, there's things we can do that will temporarily block it. And we can create a like a sleep sanctuary using like a bed canopy.
Oh,
And
cool.
that's a really good solution. But when you have a bed canopy, it's also really important to reduce electric fields that from the wiring in the walls in that room.
Mm.
And so it's a little more complicated. We just identify which circuits affect the sleep area and how can those be safely turned off at night. It's one of those things where I say, it's good to have professional advice on it because sometimes people just make mistakes and they do things that can make things worse.
Oh yeah, I don't want that. Definitely don't want that.
Yeah.
So what, for those who are considering having their homes assessed, what does that process typically involve?
So it typically takes like an average sized single family home, takes about 4 to 5 hours. And uh, I measure the 4 different frequencies with everything on. And then we go through the process of identifying the causes and how to reduce those exposures.
Mm-hmm.
And I take about the first half hour and walk people through what are the 4 EMFs, what are they caused by, what does the science say, and what do the numbers mean? Because then people get it when they see what they're being exposed to. So
Mm.
that's basically the process.
Do you ever work with people on new builds? Like when someone's actually like starting to build their own home and they know that they want to have a healthy home, do you come in and advise there?
Yes, I've had some of those over the years and worked closely with the contractors and the homeowner to give them suggestions for a lower EMF home. And sometimes the client will want me to evaluate particular devices or light fixtures or all different kinds of things, appliances.
Mm, that's awesome. Um, Running a specialized business like EMF Healthy definitely requires a unique approach, I'm sure.
Yeah.
How do you educate and build trust in a field that's often misunderstood? You've spoke on this a little bit, but like, do you usually sense more of a uh, trust building with your clients or with contractors? And is there ever any like butting heads there or any eye rolls? I mean, I'm super into holistic health stuff, and sometimes people who don't get it, they'll look at me like, okay, Do you ever encounter
Yeah.
any of that?
Usually by the time people are going to hire me,
Mm-hmm.
they know they need or they want this service. Oftentimes they have complex chronic health conditions and they are seeing an integrative doctor
Yep.
and their doctor has recommended it. So generally I don't need to convince people. I don't try. I do
Yeah.
ask that if we have an assessment that any of the decision makers are there, because if you have like a skeptical spouse,
Yeah.
it's really important that they hear it. Otherwise, it can just be a waste of their time and money
Yeah.
because the spouse isn't going to be able to. The one person would have a hard time answering the other person's questions, and then nothing might happen. So
Mm.
I do ask for that. Um, I do speak to local organizations, and give these presentations, and that helps people to understand it better. But I've had situations, I had one where the client wanted advice on shielding her home. She wanted to shield the entire home. And so I worked closely with the contractor, and then the clients, and it turned out he didn't do anything that I advised him to do.
Oh, wow.
And I said, and then the client got back to me and she said, well, he said he didn't think we needed to do that. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, so she was a little upset, and we had to kind of go back, and the thing is if you do it wrong and you're using this paint inside the home, you can electrify the walls and you can cause a safety issue. So
Yeah.
I was very firm, in terms of what they had to do to go back and correct this so that we didn't have that issue.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely why you need to talk to the expert with stuff like this. What advice would you give to people who were looking to build a home service business in a niche market like yours?
Yeah, I mean, it took perseverance for me, because everybody knows they need an electrician or a painter or a plumber, but people don't many people don't think they need this service. And so it took perseverance and understanding how to, best get people to understand.
Yeah. Have you seen an increase in demand for your services with people working more online and home-based businesses since they're spending more time at home and they have more control over their environment?
I don't know that it's been specifically that, but I'm always glad when someone calls me and they tell me they're working from home, because they have much more control over it than if they're in an office.
Yeah, definitely. Um, for our listeners who are driven entrepreneurs and business owners, how can optimizing their home environment contribute to their overall performance and well-being?
Yeah, I think it can really help, because um, like I was mentioning, some of the most common issues, the difficulty concentrating, the fatigue, headaches, brain fog. I mean, that just makes it harder to do any kind of job.
Yeah, definitely. Like, even I was telling you before we started, these headphones, they're called Defender Shield headphones. I'm not sponsored by them, but they have air tubes, and that's to mitigate EMF exposure to the head. And the reason why I got them is because even with the corded Apple headphones, the ones that plug into your phone, I was noticing I was getting tinnitus like every night before I would go to bed, when on the days that I would wear the headphones, and then I would skip the headphones for a few days, the tinnitus would go away. And when I'd put them back in, it was like, I mean, there was no question that it was the headphones causing it. And since I've switched to these ones, I've not had any more tinnitus, which is great. Um, and the sound quality is pretty good for it being air tube situation. So, the sound is coming from here, these little speakers, and then it's traveling up. So they seem to be a pretty good, not perfect, I'm sure, but pretty good alternative. Uh, they
That's great.
they have the little tiny ones that you put in your ears too, but I didn't really like those because they would always fall out. So I just went with these Mac Daddy ones.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed those when we connected, so I thought
Mhm.
that was great.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the way that I found out about you was on the building biology website, because I am personally passionate about healthy living environments, because I had my own really bad exposure to a unhealthy, toxic home, which it wasn't
Mm,
EMF, but it was mold. And
yeah.
I've heard that EMF can actually exacerbate mold issues in the home. Does that track? Is that true? Do you know anything about that?
I've heard that too. I've heard that too. And also mold can make EMF sensitivities worse. So
Yeah.
they both seem to compromise immune function.
Mm.
And so yeah, that's my understanding of it as well.
Have you had any tech people contact you? Anyone that works in tech and be like, "Hey, we need you to come through."
Yeah, one was an executive at a tech company,
Mm.
and he said, "I don't want this known that I'm doing." And of course, I never ever would disclose any information about any client, but
Yeah.
he was a little bit. They do want to know.
Yep. Yep. I had a feeling, because yeah, the more you know, the more you know, and we're all in this EMF soup now. So I feel like your services are going to be more sought after the more that we understand about EMF, and
Yeah,
there's not a lot of people out there like you.
yeah,
So I'm glad that you're doing this work, and I'm excited for whenever we have a long-term home for you to come assess it, or maybe a new build someday. Uh,
yeah.
Currently, we're in Maui, Hawaii, and we're in a home from the 1950s, and
Mm,
it's pretty bare bones, cinder block, um, on the beach, a lot of outdoor living, lots of open air. So I feel like it's less EMF here than what I'm typically used to in Phoenix.
yeah,
I just feel it in my body because I am super sensitive. I'm one of
yeah.
those people. But yeah, whenever we have our long-term home, I'd love to have you and come assess it, make sure that it's on the up and up.
Thanks. And it's kind of a blessing in disguise that you're sensitive to it, because then you can take the steps to reduce your exposures. Whereas people who might not feel these early warning symptoms, you know, who knows that if they have a bigger risk for getting the more long-term serious issues.
Definitely. Yeah, I think we'll find out more in the future when these things are more studied. Um,
And there's actually thousands of studies
wow.
on the health effects. Like there's more evidence now, and these are peer-reviewed studies, of the
Yeah.
harmful effects of EMF than when the government finally said that cigarette smoking was harmful. And
What? Wow.
yes, I would highly recommend the Bioinitiative report.
Okay.
And I have a link to that on my website. There's uh, basically it was done first in 2007 and then updated in 2012, 2014, 2020, 2022. And it was a review of all the peer-reviewed studies by independent doctors and scientists with no ties to the wireless industry. And so even back in 2014, it included up to like 4,000 studies and was like 500 pages. But there is a summary for the public, which is only like 18 pages. And there's a link to that on my website, emfhealthy.com. And when you start reading through that, I mean, it's pretty it's pretty sobering in terms
Mm,
of, and this is 10 years ago when
wow.
the 2014 one was done.
Wow. Yeah. I'm gonna definitely dive into it because I'm pretty nerdy about this type of stuff. So I always love to learn more.
Great.
And have you heard of Dr. Jack Cruz?
I have. He's spoken a lot about EMFs. I haven't listened to him in particular, but I've heard about him. And by the way, it's great to see someone young like you who's really interested in this. Mostly it tends to be, as people are getting older and they are starting to really worry about their health.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've just been so sensitive my whole life to everything, and I grew up really sick and with other chronic environmental exposures in my home. I grew up in a moldy house, which I didn't know until
Hmm.
I had gotten sick from mold in my adult life, and then my family was like, "Oh, you know that the old house we lived in had black mold in the roof, and we had a roof leak constantly." And I'm like, "Well, you guys." I lost 2
Yeah.
grandmothers in that house. My dad got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and my grandpa has Parkinson's. We all lived in that
Oh,
same house, and so
I'm sorry.
it's touched me deeply, and then with all of my own, autoimmune type symptoms that I've had over the years. So, I view a healthy home as of the utmost importance. I mean, it's affected
Yeah.
my life greatly, and I just feel like it's something that not enough people are talking about. And because our business, is marketing for home service businesses, I feel like the more that we get people like you connected into the world of builders and electricians and people who are, listening to this platform, the better, because I just think that it is the future if we want to continue thriving and be, disease free as a species.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so grateful for that original cell tower,
Yep.
because it's I've learned so much that's helped me have a healthier house for me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you're based out of Sedona, right?
I live in Sedona. I do most of my work in the Phoenix area because it's such a big population area.
Yeah. And do you ever travel outside of that, like Phoenix, Sedona? I'm sure Flagstaff could probably get you if they wanted to.
I I mostly stay in the upper part of Arizona,
Okay.
Prescott, Flagstaff, Phoenix area. Yeah.
Awesome. And so if people want to contact you, you had mentioned your website, emfhealthy.com. And I know I've contacted you through phone and email. What is the best for you?
Either my phone, and by the way, it is a corded phone,
Okay.
and or email. And so my phone number is 928-963-3233, and that's on my website. And my email is liz@emfhealthy.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope many people contact you after this and get their homes checked out and um yeah, keep those exposures down in our techie world. I think that you might have inspired me to maybe ditch this finally that I have an attachment to.
Well, we say any reduction in exposures is worth doing.
Yep, I
Yeah.
agree. Well, thank you so much, Liz. It's been a pleasure having you on here and would love to have you on again in the future. Thank you for all your wisdom and for what you do to help keep people healthy in their homes. And if you are a developer or an electrician and you want some expert insight into what you're doing to make sure that your clients are living in a healthy home, go ahead and contact Liz. And if you're just a homeowner or someone who's concerned about EMF in your home, reach out to Liz. She knows what she's doing, and make sure that your little nest is healthy for you to be in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me too.
Of course. Thanks, Liz.